Unit 6, which is going to cover lists, loops, and traversals. As you can see, we're going to start out with lists, where we will explore, investigate, practice, and make, and then loops, where we will follow that same pattern to explore, investigate, practice, and make. And then we will cover traversals, which we will explore, investigate, practice, and make. And we will come back to the hackathon project after we submit our create project for the AP exam. So after the traversals make, we will have our assessment. So let's get started. So what I want you to do, since if you're doing this without being in class, I just want you to think of a lists of information that you encounter on a daily basis. And then I want you to write down in your journal, why are these lists useful? So pause the video here so you can do that. So some lists that we talked about in class are like your class schedule. That's a list of the classes that you go to and the times that you go to them. That's useful because it lets you know what classes you're in, where they are, who the teacher is, when they are. And another list we mentioned in class is your list of schoolwork or grades in PowerSchool. They show you what you haven't done, what you have done, how well you did on them, and ultimately what your grade in the course is. So those are just a couple of examples. So this was a hands-on activity, okay? So what you're going to want to try to do is gather these supplies, if you can, because it helps to have a visual in order to really understand the concept of a list. If you want to try it without having that physical, tangible list, then you can try that. And if that doesn't work, then you might want to come back to this part of the lesson and gather these materials. So, to start out, we have covered what variables are and how they can help us store one piece of information. So, for example, this variable is named my name, and the information stored inside this variable is the name Jose. But what if we have lots of information? So what you would want to do is pause the video so that you can think of challenges that you would encounter if you need to store 10 or 100 or 1,000 pieces of information using variables. So pause the video here so you can think of a couple of challenges. So one challenge is that you would need to make a variable for each piece of information, and it could get difficult to name them all, especially if you have to have a meaningful name for each one of those. So for example, our days of the week, likely our variable name would be day of the week, and we might name it day of the week 1, day of the week 2, day of the week 3, or just day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. Luckily, there's only 7 days of the week, but what if we did months that way? And what if we did students that way? How many students go to our school? Like 1,000, okay? So it could get pretty messy whenever we have a lot of pieces of information like that. And that's where creating and accessing lists can be helpful. So in this lesson, we're going to practice using a new way to store information called a list. So follow the instructions here to make a list of your own, or you could copy this list. So what you do is you have a larger bag. We used gallon bags, and then we had snack bags. We labeled them 0, 1, and 2, and in each snack bag, we put one value. when we started numbering our bags, we started at 0 because in computer science, whenever the computer scientists start counting, they always start at 0. So our list name would be the big bag, okay? The list is made up of elements. Each element has its own index or index number, okay? Indexes or indices start at 0 and they count up. The length of the list is how many elements it contains, though, not the largest index number. Because, as you can see, there's a discrepancy between these two values. We have 3 elements, but the highest number is 2. So one way that you could determine is whatever the last value is, you could say n plus 1. That would give you the total number of elements. Or if you're trying to figure out what the last index value is, you could say n minus 1, which would give us 2. Now, the difference between how JavaScript is written and how the AP test will have it is that while JavaScript's index values start at 0, the AP test is going to have them start at 1. Okay, so that's just going to be something that you have to remember and the difference. And usually it will tell you that what value the index is starting at. But for the AP test, they like counting starting at 1. So in that case, your index numbers will be the same numbers as your element. But that's not how it is in actual JavaScript. So one thing that I want you to notice is that all of the bags can be folded up and put into the big variable bag. Sometimes we want to think about the whole list like this, but sometimes we want to think about individual elements of the list. So this is something you should add into your journal. This is how you create a list, okay? This command is what creates and assigns a list to a variable. So a list is indicated by square brackets. Notice the square brackets. Variables just use parentheses, right? But if you see square brackets, you know it's a list. Otherwise, this left part of the equal sign looks the exact same as a variable would, okay? Now, each value in the list is separated by a comma, okay? So what I would have you do in your journal, write the command, well, this part, write out the command that creates the list that you just made with your bags, whether those were physical bags or imaginary bags. Write out the command that would create that list. And likely what you'll do for this submission, since this is just an explore lesson, we don't have an activity guide, so you'll likely just use your journal entries, put those onto a Google Doc, and you'll submit that Google Doc to this assignment post if you're not in class. All right. So if we want to access the values in our list, we use square brackets next to the name of the list. So this I would add to my journal, and a good header for this would be how to access an element in a list. So whenever I see this, the number that is in here indicates the index position. So whatever number is in the brackets, that's going to be the index position, not the position in line. Like this would be the first position, this would be the second, this would be the third. No, this is index 1, which is going to be this one, okay? So what do lunch food 0 and lunch food 2 access? Go ahead and write that answer in your journal and add that to your Google Doc. Now, Lists and expressions. You can replace the list access with a copy of the variable that it holds the same way that we do with variables, okay? So 3 plus my number's 1. Well, what is in my number's 1? If we look over here, we see it's 20, okay? And so 3 plus 20 would evaluate to 23. Now, what would my number 0, which is 10, and my number's 2, which is 25, evaluate to? 35. So write 3 expressions that include accesses to the list that you created. You can use these for examples. You can use these examples for inspiration. Okay. Pause the video here so that you can add that to your journal and to the document that you're going to turn in. Now, this in your journal would have, you're going to add this example, and the example header might say something like how to assign a value to a list. So we can assign the index of a list just like a variable. What you would do is you would have the name of your list here and where you want this to go, or where you want the value to go in the list, and then what value you want to go in that position. Okay? So whenever we do this, whatever was previously in index 1, once we replace it with hello, whatever was there before is gone. Okay, so let's look at this example. For the list, my numbers, we have index 0 of 10, index 1 of 20, and index 2 of 25. Now, if we said my numbers 0 is 5, we now have 5, 20, and 25. So what would you get if we said my number's 2 is 30? We would be replacing whatever number is in spot 2 or index 2 with the number 30. So our final list should say 5, 20, and 30. So what I want you to do in your journal is run this program and tell me what our final list would be. Okay, you can add this to your document that you're going to submit also. Pause the video here so you have time to kind of work all of this out in your head, okay? It helped me a lot to write down what my list would be at the end after each line ran. So for example, if this is the list I'm starting with and I'm replacing what's in spot 1, index 1, so 0, 1, I'm replacing the word hat with the word cat, I would write down 20, cat, pow, 5. That helped me keep it in order for each line. So pause the video here so you can do that. So at the end of this line, we have 20, cat, pow, 5. Now, that is, okay, we're going to replace what's in index 2, which is 0, 1, 2, pow, with what we have in index 1, which is now cat. So we should have 20, cat, cat, 5. Now we're going to place in spot 0 the value that we have in index 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 5 plus 10. So we're replacing this 20 with the number 15. So we should have 15, cat, cat, 5. But now we're going to replace that 5 at index 3 with the new value in index 0, which is 15, plus 15. So at the very end, we should have 15, cat, cat, 30. So what's important is not necessarily right now that you get this perfectly, because if you can tell right here, they're missing quotation marks. But what's important is that you understand what's happening along the way and how we can get to this end result, okay? Because this is just us exploring. Now, run this program, do the same thing, and add the results to your journal and your Google Doc to submit, and pause the video here so you have time to go through it by yourself first. Okay, so we're starting with this list: dog, cat, 3, 10. Index values are 0, 1, 2, 3. Now here, we're saying index 2 minus, what is 2 minus 1? It is 1. So we're actually saying my stuff index 1. We're replacing the value in index 1 with the value tree. So we should have dog, tree, 3, 10. Now, this is getting a little tricky. Okay, first we need to evaluate my stuff 0. What is my stuff 0? It's going to be dog. Okay, so that's going to be on the right side. Then we need to evaluate my stuff 2. All right, what is at the index of 2? 0, 1, 2, the number 3. So ignore this and put the number 3. So my stuff 3, what's at my stuff 3? 0, 1, 2, 3, 10. Well, it doesn't really matter what's at my stuff 3 because we're going to replace it with this my stuff 0, which is dog. So your list should end up looking like dog, tree, 3, dog. If you don't understand how we got that, try going back and going through it again. Replace all of these with what is actually there in that value and see if that helps. And if that doesn't help, then reach out to me so we can work it out, okay? Now we're going to talk about changing the list. We're going to learn 3 different commands that we can use to change our list. The first one is remove item, list, index. So a good header for this section in your journal would be how to change your list. And then I would put this one first because the order of these numbers that we use are going to be, or these values are going to be important, okay? So the remove item command will remove an item from a list. The item at the index given is shifted to the right. No, it's shifted. Well, when it removes the item from the list, everything to the right shifts to the left. So for example here, we have a list that contains 10, 20, and 25. Well, we said remove item of the list my numbers at index 1. So that means we totally took out 20, and then everything else shifted to the left. So what would happen if we said remove item of list my numbers at index 0? Okay, we are left with just index 0, and our value of that is 25 because we took the 10 out and the 25 moved over to take its spot. Okay, so the next way to change a list is to append item. So I would add this to your journal. This will add an item to a list. A new index, okay, a new index is added to the end of the list, and the new item is placed in that. So if we start with var my numbers equals 10, and we say append the list my numbers with the value 50, it's just going to add 50 to the end. Okay, it's going to assign a new index and add 50. So what would we have if we said append item of my list with 100? Well, it's going to add another index over here, which would be 2, and it's going to put the value of 100 in that spot. So again, if that does not make sense, try to rewatch it, and if it still doesn't make sense, let me know so we can work it out, because these are likely to be test questions on the AP test. Even if you don't use this type of command in your program for the AP test, it's likely to be a test question. So we want to make sure that you're prepared for that. And then the third way to change a list is using insert item. The insert item command will add an item to the middle of a list, okay? The item is placed in the index given, so this information is very important and the order of this information is very important, okay? Every item after the new value is inserted moves to the right to make space, okay? A new index is added to the very end of the list so that what was previously there, it's still at the end, it just has a new index. So like this, if we start with a list, var nums equals 10, 50, and we say insert item to the list nums in the index 1 with a value of 20, we're just going to kind of move 50 over, give 50 index 2, okay, so that way index 1 is available, and then we're going to put the value of 20 inside index 1. So now this is our new list, 10, 20, 50. What if we say insert item to list nums in index 1 of 100? What's our list going to look like? Well, these guys have to move over to the right to make room for 100 to go here. So 50 is going to be in index 3, 20 will be in index 2, and then 100 will be in index 1. So what I want you to do is run this program, add the results to your journal and to the Google Doc that you're going to turn in, and this is a command reference for you to use, okay? What is the length of the list at the end? Also tell me what will the list be once you are done running it. Pause the video here so you have time to do that. So variable a list equals 20 hat pow. So we're going to append the item of a list with the item 5. Now remember, when we append, what happens? It just gets added to the end. So our new list is 20 hat pow 5. Now append item a list with the value of 10, or the item of 10. So now it's 20 hat pow 5 10. Remove item from a list at index 1. So this is 0, 1. So now we're taking hat out. So now we have 20 pow 5 10. Insert into a list index 2 item bang. So 0, 1, 2. And then this is index 3. So our final list should say 20 pow bang 10. No, JK, because insert item, my bad. So 20 pow, we said insert it 2. So this is index 1. So we would insert it right after, we would insert bang right after pow, and then 5 and 10 just get moved over. Okay. Now, pause the video so that you can run this and tell me what the list length is at the end and what the order of the list is. So this one I had to write out also. Okay, it was much easier to do that. So we have 2, 5, po. So append, we're adding it to the end. The same thing that's in index 2, which is po, plus ta, plus 2, this 2, because that's in index 0. So po, ta, to, potato, all right? But we're adding it to the end. So our new list should be 2, 5, po, potato. Now, insert item into B list, index 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So 0, 1, it's going to go in between here. So now we're going to have 2, go, 5, potato. Now remove B list, index 2. So what do we have in index 2 right now? 2, go, 5. Okay, so we're going to get rid of 5, and we're still going to have 2, go, potato. All right? Make sure that you're able to get this as your answer, okay? So to wrap up, we're going to watch a couple of videos about lists.
My name is Brendan Reville. I'm from Australia and I learned to program when I was 10 years old. Since then, I've worked on the Xbox team, and now here at Code.org, I've helped build some of the Hour of Code tutorials that I know a lot of people have enjoyed. Whether you're planning out your day, brainstorming ideas for a project, or choosing songs for a party, you'll probably want to make a list. Lists help us stay organized by ordering all the relevant pieces of information, one after the other, in a single place. The same principle applies when we write programs that include many pieces of related information. Variables are useful for holding a single piece of information, but as we collect more information, keeping the variables organized can be complicated and cumbersome. For example, what if you wanted to keep track of everybody's name in class or an entire school? It's impractical to create hundreds or thousands of individual variables, and impossible if you don't know how many items should be tracked ahead of time. In programming, a list is a container used to keep similar pieces of data organized in one place. You can think of it like a container that grows or shrinks to fit the number of items it has inside. The main items you can do to a list are add or replace items, access items, and remove items. In JavaScript, a list is called an array. You may hear list or array used interchangeably, but we'll refer to it as a list to keep it simple. A basic example of a list would be all your contacts, on your phone, in your email, etc. Let's see how this would work. To start off, you need to create a list. You do this by using square brackets. An empty list looks like this. You can also create a list with some initial values in it. Just write out the values, separated by commas, inside the square brackets. For example, you could make a list of numbers like this, or a list of names, as in a contact list, like this. Just like how you can assign a number or a string to a variable, like var x gets 5, you can also assign a list to a variable. You can think of a list as a container of numbered slots. Each slot can have one value in it.
All right, and then here is our next video about accessing lists.
To access an individual item from your list, write out the name of the list and the number of the slot you want to access, like this. This means, give me the item in the list names, sitting in slot number 2. The official term for slot number is index, so we would read names, left bracket, 2, right bracket, as names at index 2. You might have noticed that the first index in the list is 0. In programming, we usually start counting at 0, which means that names at index 0 is the first item of the list, and names at index 2 is actually the third item in the list. When your program runs, the computer will look up the current value that lives at the given index of the list, just like the computer looks up the current value of a variable. For example, if you have a list of numbers called numList, you can create an expression like this. Var sum gets numList at index 2 plus numList at index 5. The value stored in index 2 is 40, and the value stored at index 5 is 60, so the variable sum is assigned the value 100.
All right. So these are the key takeaways. You can pause this to read over this. And that's the end of our first lesson. So you are ready to move on to lesson 2.